We get our call sign. It's really a rite of passage because it's a symbol that we've finished our combat mission ready training, that we're ready to deploy. And I got my call sign, and my call sign was KC, which is my initials, but also stands for Killer Chick. I decided in 5th grade, so 1986 for me, that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And that came about after watching the launch of the Space Shuttle Challenger. For me, there was something in that moment, initially just the thrill and excitement of the launch and a flight, and then watching the tragedy kind of play out when the Challenger exploded. I think, to me, I had this moment of realization that I knew those astronauts died doing something that they believed in, something that was bigger and more important than themselves. And I personally wanted to go be an astronaut. That was my initial goal. And after talking to my parents, they told me that a lot of the astronauts had been pilots. A lot of those pilots had gone to the Air Force Academy. And so in 5th grade, I decided I was going to go to the Air Force Academy. I was going to become a fighter pilot and maybe someday go on to become an astronaut. So for me, once I got to pilot training, I knew I wanted to fly fighters. I just didn't know what I specifically wanted to fly. I knew it was a fighter of some sort, but I started asking questions from other pilots who had flown some of the different aircraft. And I realized that I really enjoyed the low-level missions that we were flying, so that was part of it. But I also realized, as we talked to pilots about what they did, that the mission of the A-10, this idea of being focused on close air support and supporting our troops on the ground, to me, that was a mission that I could get on board with. I mean, that was a mission that I could believe in and felt passionate about. March 1st, 2003, we arrived in Kuwait at Al Jaber Air Base. And to me, I mean, I had been there before as part of Operation Southern Watch, but this was different because when we landed, I think we were one of the last A-10 squadrons, and the ramp was covered with other A-10s, with F-A-18s, with rescue helicopters. I mean, it was clear to me that the war was coming. Some of the initial missions were actually fairly quiet. We did a lot of escort for convoys as they made their way north towards Baghdad. But once we got to Baghdad, things got very different. Things changed dramatically. Our troops on the ground needed assistance. We were getting constant calls for close air support. And so what we did is we would take off from Kuwait, fly up to Baghdad, we would air refuel, and then we would just wait in these stacks because the situation on the ground was so intense that we wanted to be ready. We wanted to be there when the call came in. So on April 7th, 2003, I was doing just that. We refueled and we were waiting in the stack. And then we got a call. We got a call that were troops in contact. They were taking fire. They needed immediate assistance. And we just decided we were going to fly over the target area and find a way down. We were going to find a way to get down below the weather. And we got over the target area. I watched my flight lead just kind of roll inverted and dive through an open hole in the clouds. And then he told me it was my turn. And found a hole in the clouds, dove through. And I remember as soon as I popped out down below the weather, I could see this firefight, which was a little bit surreal because for us, we're usually higher than that and we don't actually see it, but I could see smoke, I could see tracers. I mean, it was everything that we trained for, but to actually see it was eye-opening. We did a couple passes of gun and rockets, and then I rolled in for my last rocket pass and lined up right underneath the bridge, hit the weapons release button, 7 rockets come down on the enemy location. And then I just pull away from the ground, away from the threat, climbing up to get our energy back when I just feel and hear a loud explosion at the back of the airplane. And I knew immediately I was hit. And I remember this kind of bright red-orange fireball, and it was loud. I mean, I remember the sound that I heard. It was loud, almost like if you got rear-ended at high speed. I mean, it just dumped the airplane over, and I mean, there was no doubt in my mind. I knew exactly what happened, which is why I keyed the radio so quickly and said, 2 got hit.
2 got hit. 2 got hit.
I remember I could see Baghdad getting closer. I instinctively just pulled back on the stick and nothing happened. I mean, I'm just plunging to the ground, now out of control. And, you know, time's slowing down in some ways. I mean, I remember looking down at the ejection handles, thinking this is the last thing I want to do is eject. and I knew that I had to just make every second count. I had a master caution light flashing at me. I had a caution panel lit up like a Christmas tree. And I realized very quickly that my hydraulic lights were on, hydraulic gauges were at 0, and the system was completely depleted. So at this point, my options are eject, which doesn't sound good, or ideally get the jet into its backup emergency system and immediately flip that switch, and the jet started climbing up and away from Baghdad. And that was kind of the first moment, like, okay, I might survive this. So we made our way, got out of Baghdad, and now we're kind of going through all the different emergency procedures. We're above the weather now, so I feel a little bit better about things. But we're going through all the emergency procedures, and my flight lead says, Casey, you need to start thinking about if you want to land or jump out of the airplane, meaning I could go back and land, attempt to land, or eject, get to friendly territory and eject. And I felt like that decision, had the potential to be the difference between life and death. Like, what if I made the wrong choice? And I just decided that I was gonna fly the airplane, get a feel for how it was flying, and make my way back. I try to stay focused. I try to just focus on all the emergency procedures, but even flying back, it's an hour. It's an hour from Baghdad, and it's really hard to keep your mind focused on the task at hand. And there was thoughts of like, I may not survive this, or what if I crash, and just kind of thinking about my life at that point and the things that I hadn't accomplished that I wanted to. And but I couldn't stay there, right? I had to kind of compartmentalize that, tuck it away, think about it another time, and get my airplane on the ground. And I remember coming in for that final approach because, this was it, right? This was finally there was no more waiting at this point, and now it was going to either turn out okay or turn out terribly wrong. Coming in short final, and the airplane kind of just did this quick roll to the left, and it was this moment of like, am I going to crash? Is it going to flip over on its back? And, would I even have time to eject? Thankfully, kind of yanked the stick back very quickly, and then just watching kind of the airplane settle, and then main gear and nose gear, and the airplane was on the ground. This mission was life-changing for me in so many ways. I think having a moment, one, I got to prove myself in combat very early in my career. I established myself as a credible A-10 pilot. There's the good side of all of these things, but I think for me, I learned so much on that mission. I learned so much from that deployment, just in terms of how important it is when we work together. My flight lead was so critical that day, Lieutenant Colonel Rick Turner. He helped me get home safely. He had that mutual support. He provided me with that support and encouragement along the way. I realized how important a good wingman can be. It really set the stage, I think, for me, really for the rest of my career as a leader, as a commander, as a pilot, I think also as a person, as a mom and a wife. It really laid a foundation for me to focus on what's important and to spend my time working on things that were important to me. One of the questions that I got after I landed was, did I feel scared? And I think in the moment, I didn't even think about it. It was just my training kicked in. But I went back and listened to the audio from the mission, and I can hear the fear in my voice. I know I was scared in that moment. And what it's made me realize is it is okay to be scared. It is okay to feel fear and be nervous or anxious about whatever it is in your life, but you still have to do something with it. You have to be able to take that next step. You have to be able to be scared and do it anyway. And so writing this book is all about the fears that I have faced in my life, both personally and professionally, but also how to take action. How can you overcome that fear, and why it's so important to take that next step, even in the face of fear.